Let's go ahead and get your feet away from the wall there, Mariko. A little bit further. Good. Now from there, we're going to flatten the spine to the wall. Good. A little bit further. Okay. Now we're going to extend the mid back a little bit. Beautiful. So we're still making contact with the wall almost through the entire spine, except for the lumbar. Here there can be a slight bit of space. So right around this lower region, we can have a little bit of space. Good. From there, we're going to elevate the shoulders just a little bit. Now we're going to retract from there. Now I want to make sure that we retract the abdominal wall as much as possible here. Give me a little bit more. Fantastic. Hold that position. Okay. So we're going to get into a wall retraction next. That's going to be the general cueing at the beginning of it. So the essential goal with this technique is that you should feel your mid-back working like crazy. And then once we begin to take her into an overhead motion, don't depress the shoulders yet, Mariko. Hold that. Now, as you start lifting from there, you're going to retract and depress your shoulders. Once we get into this space here, we're going to begin to create a massive amount of fatigue in the mid-trapezius, lower trapezius region, which is right around here, right off the edge, the border of the scapula. So the idea here is, again, this is another thoracic extensor, another active thoracic extensor. Okay, so first and foremost things we want to be looking at, go ahead and bring your feet back to the wall, Mariko. We're going to start by having our feet right up to the wall, and then from there, you're just going to start taking slow steps forward until you feel like it would make it really easy. You can even bring it further forward. And you'll hit a point where you feel like you can flatten your back to the wall completely. So go ahead and try flattening your back to the wall. Pretty easy there, right? Especially your lumbar. So now what I want it to be is a little bit of a challenge where she feels like she can flatten her lower back to the wall. So I want her to start just inching her way. Stop there. Now try flattening your lumbar to the wall here. A bit more of a challenge there, right? That's about the sweet spot because I want this to be a bit of a struggle. The idea is that I want her to create that posterior pelvic tilt to limit the amount of extension she's going to get into her lumbar spine. Again, to limit how much she's going to be doing this, so then she can get a truer extension out of the upper thoracic region. So the idea is right now, for her, I would guess she's about 8 to 9 inches away from the wall. Her heels are, and that's where she needs to be. Okay, so that's where we're going to be starting at. I want her to give me a little slight bend in the knees just so we're not putting too much pressure on that anterior end. From there, she's going to give me a posterior tilt on the wall. And she's going to just aim on a general basis to flatten her entire spine to the wall. So as I'm tracking up her back here, I can feel that her spine is mostly flat to the wall. If there's one area where I don't want it to flatten too much, I would say it's the lumbar area. I mean, there's such a thing as potentially doing too much of a posterior pelvic tilt where she starts shifting her lumbar too far back. So I'm going to actually give her a little bit of space on the lumbar, just a little fragment of a space. So give me a little anterior pelvic tilt, hold that, because she was giving me a bit too much posterior tilt. And that's another thing I want you guys to consider is that you can do too much posterior pelvic tilt just like you can do too much anterior tilt. So you'll have to kind of watch out for that yourself. But in general, I still shouldn't really be able to fit my hand easily through here in the lumbar spine from here on the wall. So the idea is that you should still feel like there's no space between the entire swell of her back and on the wall. So she's flat on the wall here. From there, I'm going to have her start to bring her hands up in this position. I'm going to have her elevate her scapulas just a little bit. Hold that. Now I'm going to have her retract her shoulders. Now, if there's one thing that people make a mistake on commonly when it comes to getting into a position like this, is that when they do a shoulder retraction, they also go into a depression. So I want you to retract your shoulders, and I want you to depress. That is going to be very problematic on this region of the neck, and that could end up causing thoracic outlet syndrome. There's actual scientific studies where they're actually proving this to be the point now. They're indicating that when you retract your shoulders and you depress them, that could do more damage than good. So realistically, what I want her to do is we'll start in a bit of a protraction. She's going to elevate a slight bit. Stop there. Now I want her to retract from that position. So go ahead and start retracting from there, Mariko. Straight back. Okay. So the idea here, the cues that we're going to look for, her back is completely flat to the wall. She's doing the posterior pelvic tilt, and I'm going to start having her give me a little bit of thoracic extension where she starts creating a little bit of space on the thoracic region from where she's at. So I want you to start lifting your breastbone up a little bit, and I want her to hold her posterior pelvic tilt. So she's going to do thoracic extension, posterior pelvic tilt at the same time. And this is where she should begin to feel a little bit of tension on the thoracic region. What we want to be looking for here is that her elbows don't come all the way back. This generally tends to be a problem with people when they do a technique like this, where you'll see that the humerus is kind of displaying an anterior tilt here, where it's kind of going forward. I want to make sure that the elbow is directly underneath the shoulder joint. She's elevated there, and she's holding that position. Another thing we're going to look for here is that I want her to expand her ribs as much as possible. Expand the rib cage as much as possible while she's holding the flatness. Second, I told her to expand her rib cage, she lost space right here with this thoracic region. So what I want her to do from that position is retract her abdominal wall. She's going to pull in to flatten that region to the back. After that, she's going to go right back into trying to extend her spine and expand her rib cage. And when she does all of those things together, she's going to feel a tension on the thoracic spine. So basically speaking, you want to make sure that your spine is almost completely flat while you're expanding your rib cage. All right. So some of you are going to have to do more posterior tilt than others. So you'll have to kind of figure that out. But on a general basis, you want to have a person doing a posterior pelvic tilt here, and then you want to track up the back to make sure that the entire spine is flat to the wall. Once the entire spine is flat to the wall, you're going to have them expand the rib cage as much as possible. If they expand the ribs and then you notice that the ribs come off the wall, you emphasize more of a retraction of the abdominal wall, as we're doing right now. And then from there, you try and reinstitute the thoracic extension. Another thing that we're going to look for is the alignment of the shoulder joint itself, that the elbow is directly underneath the shoulder and that she's displaying 290-degree angles where the palms are facing upward to facilitate more external rotation in the humerus and in the forearm. Okay? So that's going to be the basic position that we're going to be at right now. Now, if you want to increase the amount of demand you want to place on the thoracic spine, the concern that I'm going to have, because what I'm going to do is place weights on her hands here in this position. What I'm going to have her do is resist the weights, but my goal is that when she resists the weights, she doesn't go with her elbows back this way and begin to put a little bit of an anterior shear on the humerus. It's not to say that this is bad. It's just to say that right now, I want her thoracic to get engagement, and she's going to get more engagement of the T-spine when she's holding this position here. So what I'm going to do is grab a couple of 5-pound kettlebells, and I'm going to place them in this position, here to here. And you might notice yourself that if you start holding weights in your hands when you're doing this exercise, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to try and bend at the elbow joint even more, or you're going to try moving the elbows back. One of the two. Right now, she's chosen to start bending even further. So I want you to drop the hands a little bit lower, Marigo. Hold that. Now I want you to elevate the shoulders a little bit. Hold that. More. Now I want you to start retracting and opening up your ribs at the same time. Retract your shoulders and open up your ribs at the same time. This is where she's going to start getting some work in. Her biceps are going to get somewhat involvement, but most of what should be working is everything back here in the thoracic spine. She's kind of flexing the spine a little bit too much because I can feel too much pressure on my fingers. She's pushing on the wall too hard. So what I want her to do is start trying to lift her breastbone up a little bit higher for me. Keep going more. Beautiful job. Retracting the abdominal wall. Beautiful. Retract the shoulders now, Marigo. More. Retract them even further. This is where the struggle is going to happen. Can you feel the thoracic spine muscles working? Yeah. Move the elbows forward a little bit further. Beautiful job. And that's going to really begin to start lighting up those thoracic extensors. If I want to challenge her even more and say, all right, we're going to really do work, I just increase the weight. And you guys will have to kind of figure that out for yourselves. Go ahead and extend the elbows a little bit further for me, Marigo. Beautiful. Now I want your shoulders to protract forward a little bit. Protract them more. So you guys will see that the deltoids kind of start popping out there. You kind of want to keep that delt alignment. You don't want this to look like fibrous. You want to actually see that there's like a slight bit of roundness in the shoulders. Now I'm going to have her retracting your humerus. More. Hold that. Expand the ribs. Give me a little bit more elbow flexion now, Marigo. More. Fantastic work. Now bring the hands straight forward. Stop there. Elevate the shoulders. Retract the shoulders. Beautiful job. She lost contact right here in the lumbar. Pull the abdominal wall in. Come on, Marigo. Let's go. You see the shaking going on? Something new is happening. She's doing really well. This is a lot of weight though, to be honest. So let's go ahead and give you a break here. So the idea is, go ahead and take a break, Marigo. The idea is that you, for the most part, you want your spine to be flat, lumbar maybe a little bit less. There's such a thing as putting too much pressure on the wall too. Essentially what you want to do is almost have it to where you're gliding on the wall, but not having so much pressure that you're kind of pushing onto the ground. You're almost gliding on the wall, having your spine completely flat to the wall. So the idea here is, again, just to build the thoracic extension, trying to build that. We're emphasizing that neutral posture to some degree, but we're just emphasizing the thoracic extension a whole lot more. Okay, adding the weights, by you bringing the weights forward this way, that's going to facilitate a demand to create an extension in the body. Imagine when you see the people over at the gym when they're doing really heavy bicep curls and they start doing this. Where do they bend from? They end up bending from the hip joint. They end up bending from the lumbar. This is where they get their work in when they do that bicep curl. What I kind of want you to do is essentially like a bicep curl like that, but instead of bending from the lumbar, I want you to kind of bend from the T-spine. And when you bend from the T-spine, that's what ends up loading up the muscles that are located around that region. So that's kind of my intent with doing that with those weights. So so once you graduate to having good alignment when you're in that wall retraction, what you'll then do is add load with dumbbells or kettlebells, whatever weighted objects you have, to increase more demand on the thoracic extensors. So now what we're going to do, after we've already covered that exercise, I'm going to then take her into an overhead retraction. So we're going to pretty much hit that same position. We're going to start off, bring your feet all the way to the wall just to get us ourselves started. Start creeping away until she finds kind of that sweet spot where she can glide the lower back to the wall. Beautiful. So she's not fully smashing my hands or smashing the wall. It's more she's kind of gliding there. Beautiful. So I can't really fit my fingers there because her body's still obstructing, but it shouldn't feel like it's smashing my hand. So she's doing really well there. So right there's about the sweet spot. Go ahead and move the knees forward just a little bit for me, Mariko. Perfect. Okay. Now from there, we're going to move right back into the thoracic extension. So extend the T-spine a little bit because it's smashing the wall a little bit. We're going to retract the abdominals. Retract the abdominals a bit further. Expand the rib cage. Fantastic work. So she's expanded the rib cage. Now we're going to start talking about positioning the shoulders. Now she's going to retract the shoulders to the wall. And expand the rib cage even more. And everything is gliding. You can flatten this a little bit more, Mariko. Retract the upper abdominals. You'll notice that anytime you expand that rib cage, you're going to notice that the spine wants to round backward or extend too far forward. You guys have to kind of find that neutral point. Right now she hasn't lost space. That feels pretty good. Now she's smashing the lumbar a little bit too much. Give me a little anterior tilt. Hold that. That's about good. Okay, let's elevate the shoulders a bit further. Retract. Expand the ribs. Okay, so now what we're going to do next is begin to move the arms upward in space here. Okay, she's going to get to this point, keep that shoulder elevation. Now when she starts getting from this point and moving her hands upward, what she will then do is begin to depress the scapulas, depress them down as the arms come up. And this is going to be a scapular burner, lower scapular and mid scapular burner. Depress the shoulders a little bit, Mariko, and then reach up at the same time. This is where you'll begin to get the mid traps and these muscles that are enable you to have better overhead motion. Beautiful job. And so the idea here is that as you lift the arms, you depress the shoulders. So the arms go up like this, the shoulders go down like this to facilitate that motion. You just hold that for a few seconds and then we'll take a break. Just let the arms come back down. Bingo. So the idea is it's not till you get to about neutral here that you're going to begin to do the scapular depression to finish that motion off. So as you bring the elbows up, you depress the scapulas, reaching upward simultaneously. So as this comes down, this comes up. Also, we want to make sure that as we're doing this last range of motion to increase this overhead range and get that mid-trap firing, we want to make sure that the spine doesn't just lose connectivity. We want to make sure the core muscles are engaged, which is why we're retracting the abdominal wall. We also want to ensure that we're staying stuck to the wall, right? But not pressuring it too much, that we're utilizing the extensors to keep the thoracic, the extensors to keep the mid-back engaged through the range of motion. So all these things have to be intact while she's doing this motion with the shoulders. So we'll go right back to this again. Let's extend the arms again. Okay, so we're retracting here, expanding the rib cage. Beautiful. Then we're going to retract the shoulders. Hold that. So she's going to keep the elevation and start moving the arms up in space. Beautiful. Try keeping the elbows in a little bit further too, Mariko. Okay? So to keep the shoulders elevated, keep them elevated. So we're going to keep the elbows about here. Then as she starts reaching up from there, that's when she's going to start depressing the scapulas down. So we reach up and depress the scapula at the same time. And that's when the mid and lower trapezius muscles will start to get lit. And the idea here is just to start strengthening everything on that thoracic region at the upper ends and the lower ends of the thoracic region. And typically when most people end up lifting their arms, go ahead and take a break. We're done with the execution. I want you to give them a side view for me, Marico. So let's go ahead and face, yeah, that right there's good. Main thing I want you guys to pay attention to is that when most people lift their arms, what they'll typically end up doing is shifting their pelvis forward to lift your arms, and then shift your pelvis forward, and they'll keep their back rounded. So round your mid-back. That's what I want you guys to get away from. What I want you guys to be able to do is bring your arm back down, Marico. I want you to shift your pelvis posteriorly. Posterior, coming back, right there, no worries. Now I want you to start lifting your arm up, and I want you to start extending your mid-back as you do it. So depress the shoulder and extend the mid-back. I want you guys to have the capacity to be able to orient the lifting of your arm and the movement of your arm with your thoracic extensors. If you were going to run at some point, when you're going to create a forward drive with your arm, there's going to come a point where you need to actually use that arm drive through your thoracic extensors to finish your stride. So the idea is that this region here, everything that's in the mid-back will be really fundamental in you just having good gait mechanics and just in general having good shoulder mechanics and overall body mechanics. This is one area that people get locked up like crazy, and that was the objective of this week. And we've accomplished that. And I will see you guys on the following week. Take care.